Hello everybody, welcome to Cosmic Waves Tarot. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Today we have our first community question, which I'm so excited about. Thank you so much to this person who commented. And this individual is looking for some insight with a friendship. This has been a friend of many years, but recently they feel the friendship has grown very one-sided and perhaps a bit toxic. And so they're wondering how to let this situation go with some grace and empathy, while still recognizing that this is a difficult time in their friendship. So I'm very honored to have the chance to read for you and to try and give some insight about this friendship. Just as a reminder to everyone else, if you would like a similar reading, please don't hesitate to drop a comment, really about anything, friendship, relationship, career, life move, any topic you can think of. I would be happy to do a reading for you. But right now, I'm asking the tarot for some advice on this situation, advice on this friendship. What insight can we take with us for how to deal with this situation? Hopefully it will be relevant for this community member who commented, but maybe it will be relevant for more people as well. We have Temperance, the Hierophant, and the Queen of Swords. In this deck, she's called Independence. Right off the jump, I see that these cards, as a whole, are asking for some wisdom and some patience and some maturity. Let me get into the meaning of each one, and then I'll give a little bit of an overview. But that's the main theme that I see jumping out from the start. So we have two major arcana cards here, Temperance and the Hierophant. Then we have one court card of Swords, the Queen of Swords, Independence. I'll start with Temperance. This card, as you can probably guess from some of the visual cues, is all about balance and calm. This card really encourages us to take the middle road, not to veer to any extreme in terms of our emotions or our actions, but really to pause and reflect and take a middle path that is reasonable and fair and tempered. In the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, this individual is an angel who is standing on the ground and has one foot in the water. But because they are an angel, they have, of course, wings, and they're a celestial being as well. So we can tell from that imagery that we have to both keep our feet firmly planted on the ground, but still have, our dreams, our visions that are a little bit more of a celestial nature. And whenever Temperance comes up, I like to think of it as kind of a meditative card. It does encourage some reflection. It encourages wisdom. It says not to be too hasty and not to be too extreme. So for this person who is wondering about their friendship, I would say don't react out of super strong emotion. If you are still communicating with this person, do so in a fair way and only when you've had time to think about what you want to communicate. So definitely don't sugarcoat anything. You can share your feelings but also don't rush to judgment and don't be too harsh in your dealings with this person. Try to act out of love and respect for them and the friendship that you shared, while also honoring your feelings in the present and moving forward into the future. I think this is an excellent card in this situation, and I would really encourage you to look more into the meaning of temperance. Also, we have the Hierophant. This card is also about judgment and wisdom, and it often pertains to more of an institutionalized wisdom, like in religion or higher education. Obviously, this is kind of a papal figure, a religious person. And so oftentimes when the Hierophant comes up, it encourages us to seek wisdom and instruction from sources outside ourselves or our immediate surroundings. So perhaps there's some sort of, podcast or teaching or book that you're interested in, either about friendships or just relationships and self-development more broadly. Or maybe there's some sort of spiritual practice that you want to turn to in this time to give yourself some solace and some guidance from a higher power. This card encourages us to look up to teachers that we respect and admire. So again, if there's not an authority figure, but perhaps a older individual or a mentor or someone that you look up to, that you can ask for some advice, this card encourages us to do that as well. So again, I think in dealing with this friendship that is perhaps ending, either looking to sort of spiritual, religious practices, if those are relevant for you. If not, that is completely okay. And looking instead to some self-development or some advice. I think we can all learn from each other, and the Hierophant comes up to remind us that there are a lot of resources and there is a lot of learning for us to do. And so sometimes it's very helpful to seek that out in a little bit more of a formal setting. And finally, we have the Queen of Swords. In this deck, she's given a name, and she's called Independence. Swords in the tarot correspond to logic and the analytical mind, to wisdom. It's an air sign card. And oftentimes in the tarot, the swords can be quite harsh. They have a little bit of a difficult energy to deal with, and they sometimes, pose some challenges in this area of our life. However, the Queen is a very positive card here. Of course, the Queen is royal, she's a leader, she's a ruler, she's in charge, she can make decisions, and so she can cut off anyone that she needs to. And I do see this card as a sign that perhaps you acknowledge it is time to move on, it is time to cut some of those ties, or at least to loosen them a bit more. It doesn't look like this is necessarily a time for trying to delve back into the friendship or continuing to pour yourself out to this person. The Queen of Swords, literally being called Independence in this deck, gives a signal that you can move on, you can be independent. Perhaps this friendship was a very close one, and in which case it is hard to move on and close that chapter of your life. But the Queen is here to give you some support and some strength and to remind you that you can do it. The Queen, too, is the more nurturing expression of the swords as opposed to the King in the tarot. So she never does something out of harshness or to be mean or spiteful. She does it in a protective and nurturing way. So when she's using her sword, it's not to violent ends. but it's to ultimately peaceful and protective ends. Again, very similar with these themes. I think the Queen is calling for some wisdom, some maturity. You don't get to be the Queen without needing to make some tough decisions. But she's certainly here on your side to work with you and to encourage you to step into your independence and power, as are all three of these cards, really. So again, in summary, take your time to think about what you're saying, how you're acting. If you are going to pursue this independence card and maybe cut some ties with this friend or have a conversation for closure, do so after some contemplation and some reflection, how you actually want to communicate with them. Remember, again, not to sugarcoat anything or breeze over anything, but also not to be too harsh. And finally, you can look to some resources in order to support you in this time, maybe some spiritual practices or not, but any sort of guidance and learning from other people who have been in this situation would be very helpful. So I hope that this video provided some insight to you. I really enjoyed doing a reading for one of the community members. So again, if you're watching this, I'd really encourage you to also drop a comment if there's something that I can read for you. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I will see you for the next reading. Have a wonderful day.